Hello, this is Brian Bierke, the broker of record. Just wanted to go ahead and create a specific training that talks about representation and dual agency. We've had a few questions regarding this, as well as a couple of issues that have arisen from lack of clarification in this area. So I'm going to talk in more detail about it today. The information that I pulled is from the texasrealestate.com website, where they do have an actual page that talks about dual agency and how it works. It's also located in the Texas Real Estate Licensing Act, Chapter 1101. It talks about intermediary relationships and how they work. I have been doing it a little bit different up until now, just because of something that I didn't quite understand about the rule, but after further review and clarification on my part, I've come up with these set of rules that we're going to be adhering to going forward. So I'm asking all agents and supervisors to review this training, and if you have any questions, please let me know. So first of all, representation. It's whenever you establish the agency, and it's our job to provide the information about broker services at first substantive. This IABS actually talks about the types of representation that are available to the client, and even encourages them to seek representation. A representation agreement is actually what is the legal way to establish representation. There is other ways to establish representation, like implied representation, or you telling them that you're going to represent them. These are verbal agreements to represent. And then agency is established. Now, a representation agreement, it more specifically defines the parameters of the relationship. What are their rights and your duties as the agent, and it explicitly talks about the commissions owed and who is the responsible party for those. It's not required, but highly recommended, just because you don't want to have any kind of confusion or misunderstandings whenever it comes time to get you, the agent, paid. Let's see. Now, there are a few possible dual agency scenarios. Now, first of all, dual agency is not allowed. The only one who's allowed to actually represent both sides is the broker, and even then it's discouraged. Now, here are the scenarios that you as an agent could run into where dual agency is a risk and something that you need to be aware of. First of all, whenever you're representing the seller, if you're hosting an open house and a customer comes in without representation, this is a very common thing that happens. The next is maybe the seller procures a buyer themselves. Maybe they, found a friend at church or work or something like that that's interested in purchasing their property from them. And they may even work out some kind of napkin deal without even talking to you. Next is a buyer contacts you directly from an advertisement that you posted. These scenarios can happen whether it's leasing or sales. So these are things that you need to keep in mind whenever you're doing representation. And then on the buyer side, the most common ones, if a buyer finds a for sale by owner house and you contact the seller, and the seller does agree to pay you a commission, but they don't have representation. So again, it's another situation where the other party does not have representation, but your client does. And it is where you can fall into the trap of trying to represent both sides through either implication, or I've had a couple of agents even have both parties sign a representation agreement, which is dual representation and illegal per Trella. Okay, how to handle it. First off, dual agency, again, not permitted. It's only for the broker, not the agent. The broker may allow agents within a brokerage to represent each side, but the agent may not represent both sides. First thing you need to do, ask the other party if they have an agent that represents them. This should be the first part of your discussion whenever you meet a party and you want to confirm whether or not they do have representation. If they do not have representation, then first and foremost, be clear and disclose in writing as soon as possible to the non-represented party who you represent. So if you're at an open house, say, hey, I represent the sellers. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but just understand that I represent the sellers, so I can't offer any advice or opinions about what to do. And then later on, if they do end up wanting to submit an offer and they email you, that's your opportunity to put again in an email in writing that you represent the seller and it's clear that you do not represent them, and you provide them an IABS. Again, this IABS does not establish representation, but it encourages them to get representation. Just make it very clear. This is how you're going to protect yourself. And then finally, ask them if they'd like to have an agent appointed to them. Maybe they may have questions during the transaction, and even tell them, say, I would encourage you to seek representation. If you need, we have agents underneath our broker that we can assign to you that can help you with any advice or opinions that you may need during the transaction. So common questions that you may have during this through a dual representation is, what if the non-represented party doesn't want representation? They say very adamantly they do not want an agent. That's fine. As long as you've disclosed it in writing to all parties which party you're representing and that other party is wishing to forego representation, then you may proceed acting as a fiduciary to your client. Do not provide any advice or opinions to the non-represented party. This is very important. If they call you with questions about how to negotiate repairs after an inspection, if you are giving them advice to get an inspection done or find a different mortgage company or broker or something like that, then that's advice. And that is actually breaking your fiduciary responsibility to your client. So if they call you with questions or concerns or issues, the only thing that you can provide them is factual statements about the property, and remind them that you represent the seller and that you can't answer those types of questions. You do not have to get a signed intermediary notice if they disclose in writing that they do not want representation. We don't need that anymore. Before, I required an intermediary notice in order for you to collect on both sides. We're not doing that anymore. It's very clear on the Texas Real Estate website that it's not required as long as we disclose to all parties in writing that who represents who, and that non-represented party is wishing not to be represented. Can you collect a commission on both sides as the listing agent if the non-represented party doesn't want representation? Yes, you may. Again, no intermediary notice is required. The listing representation shows the full commission is owed to the listing broker, and then the listing broker agrees to pay a buyer's agent or a buyer's broker a commission if there is one. It's not a requirement. So if there is no buyer's agent or buyer's broker, then the listing side gets the full commission that's on the agreement. Now, keep in mind that if you're representing someone and you do not have a listing representation agreement that clearly states this, I would not encourage you to take the full commission, because your sellers may get very upset, and with nothing in writing stating that you're owed 6% or whatever agreed amount that you started off with, if you don't have something in writing that specifically states that, then you should only collect a commission as the seller's side. What if they do want representation? Since an agent cannot represent both sides, another non-biased agent must be appointed to the other party. If you're in a brokerage that only has one other agent or just you, then contact me. I have a lot of agents all across Texas that work for me and I'm also affiliated with, and I can link you up with an agent. And even if you don't want to use someone within our brokerage, you're free to contact someone that you may know that's also a licensed real estate agent to represent the other side. You don't have to pay them a full commission. You can agree to pay them a nominal fee, like $500, to represent the other party during the transaction. And let me first say that this is actually the best scenario for us. If we can get an agent on both sides of the transaction, there's never any question about breaching fiduciary responsibility to our clients. You're able to hold to your client truly and take care of them and not worry about the other side. You won't get calls about questions or concerns or issues from the other side that doesn't have a an agent representing them. Instead, they'll be calling their agent to ask, and they'll be able to get the advice that they need. Make sure that you have a degree of separation between the agents so there's nothing that the client can claim as bias or breach of fiduciary rights. What I mean by this is if you have, say, it's a husband and wife team and you are deciding to let your wife represent the other side, that is a bit of bias because both of you guys are going to receive a compensation of this. So y'all are both receiving payment from this because you're married and community property rules. So really it needs to be someone who is non-biased to either the selling party or the selling agent themselves. So make sure that it's an agent that has a good degree of separation from all of them that can represent that client to the best of their abilities without any type of incentive behind that. A signed intermediary relationship notice must be signed by all parties to the transaction. That means both the buyer and the seller have to sign the intermediary notice if you decide to have an agent on each side. So before, again, what I had was you had one party, one agent having both parties signing the intermediary notice and then just standing back and only being a glorified secretary. We don't do that anymore. The signed intermediary notice is only to be signed when there is both sides represented within the same brokerage. Okay, so finally, minimizing the liability. First and foremost, don't ever offer advice or opinions to the opposing party that you do not represent in the transaction. If they contact you, ask you questions, gently tell them that you cannot advise them since you represent the other party. Encourage the other party to seek representation or allow you to find another agent within the brokerage to represent them. This is the best outcome. Do not claim that you will represent the opposing party in a transaction when you've already have a client that you are representing. And this one really should go without saying because dual agency is illegal, but I've had it happen a couple of times recently. Don't ever claim that you are going to represent both parties. It's not okay. We don't do that. Texas doesn't allow it. So please just keep that in your mind. And please, if you do have any questions about dual agency, if y'all run into these scenarios and you want a refresher or you need a quick question answered, you can contact me. My number is 469-400-0749. You guys can always reach out to me with any questions or concerns that you have regarding these issues. Thank you.